Welcome to the Eco Scientist Podcast. My name is Amalia Valley and I am your host. In this podcast, we're going to be talking about all things science, conservation, and climate. I'm going to dive deep into the ethics, the emotions, and the facts to bring you all the information you need to survive in the world of STEM. So sit down, chill out, and let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to the Eco Scientist Podcast, guys. As you heard in that little intro, we're going to be talking all things science and conservation in this podcast. My name is Amalia Valley and I am your host. Just a little background on me to start off with. My qualifications title me as an animal ecologist. However, I'm super passionate about conservation. I've got quite an obsession with birds and the ocean, and I live for science communication. I've also got a bit of love to give chemistry and physics. Not a whole lot though, just a little. I've got experience in aquaculture, field practices, and education. I'm by no means a data analysis wizard. However, I do love a bit of magic here and there, and I really love coffee. I also have a blog where I attempt to break down scientific literature into more simple and manageable chunks so that people without science degrees can still understand the content. There's a few resources on there for educational purposes and a few posts about reducing your impact on the environment. If you really want to learn more, feel free to dive into my life via Instagram at @ecoscientist or jump on the Ecoscientist blog, which will be linked in the show notes below. If you don't care, that is cool too. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's dive a little bit into the podcast and where it all started. So throughout my degree, I did a lot of classes on the topics of climate change and conservation. And throughout these classes, there were a few common themes that usually involved global population decline, species extinction, increasing pollution from plastic and greenhouse gases, and a slew of failed attempts to fix these problems. You watch any David Attenborough documentary and he talks about these problems too. You jump online and you see articles about how long we have before the Earth reaches climate tipping points and everything falls to absolute garbage. And then you have all these people screaming at each other that climate change is a conspiracy and no, it's not. And then you have these politicians fighting over who gets the next pay rise instead of focusing on issues that actually matter. Basically, it's a lot. And then when you learn the science behind it all and you start understanding the data and the trends, you get this huge, overwhelming feeling. For me personally, it's a combination of confusion and anger and despair and this feeling that I'm way too small to do anything about it. And I thought I was alone in this feeling until I started talking to a few friends and family about it, and I stumbled across a blog called Lonely Conservationists, and I noticed that so many of the conservationists writing pieces felt the same way, and I realized I wasn't alone, which is super nice. But then I started to notice that everyone that spoke about these things and everyone I read about seemed to feel alone as well. And I mean, it's pretty hard not to. How many people, honestly, in your day-to-day life can you talk to about this feeling if you have it? I know for me, it's not many people at all. A lot of my family and friends work in different areas of public service and things like that, and it's hard for them to understand where I'm coming from sometimes. And I find that even among scientists and conservationists, it's hard to talk because we have this constant pressure to be credible and to be professional that we find ourselves under. And this whole feeling is such a niche thing that it can be hard to explain it or to find others who feel the same way who will openly talk about it. So that's what we're going to do here, guys. We're going to dive into all those feelings and experiences and give you some tips and strategies to help you overcome them. In addition to this, we're going to get really personal when it comes to minority group experiences in STEM. I'm a young woman, and I'm sure we all know about the constant struggle to be taken seriously as young women in a professional environment, especially in STEM. However, I'm a cisgender white woman, and after talking to a few friends and colleagues, as well as doing a bit of scoping on the interwebs, I've realized that there's almost no representation whatsoever of minority groups of any kind in STEM throughout the media. So what we're going to do here is we're going to talk to lots of different people from different cultural and religious backgrounds, people with different sexualities, disabilities, anyone really who is willing to talk to me about their individual experiences in STEM with hopes to help other people. Mostly, we're going to be talking about the different challenges that these people have been faced with and how they've overcome them. We're going to have our first guest in a few episodes' time, which is super exciting, so stay tuned for that one. Another thing we're going to cover quite a bit is how you can become as qualified as possible so that you can do something about the issues that you're passionate about. I get a lot of questions about how I've secured some of the work I've done and how I got so much experience up my sleeve before I finished my degree. So I'm going to answer all of those questions, and I'm giving you all the information you need to make sure that when you're out there looking for the job of your dreams, that you will be the most qualified applicant in that stack of resumes. And finally, we're going to discuss a bit of sustainability, ethics, and politics. We're going to cover big questions like how people feel about having children in an overpopulated world with an uncertain future. We're going to talk a bit about zero waste living, dietary choices, turning off your lights, growing your own food, and other elements of sustainability that I'm sure you've seen floating around the internet. We're going to talk about these things a little bit differently than what you've probably seen though. We're going to compare these things on a practical and ethical level so we can figure out where to draw the line between ethics and sustainability and your own happiness, as well as where we as individuals could be stepping up as activists and where we probably shouldn't be. Plus, we're going to do a little study and lifestyle tips, particularly for my uni students out there. Now, I'm pretty sure that covers everything that we're going to be discussing in this podcast briefly. So we're going to jump straight into a bit of a reverse Q&A, I guess you could call it. I asked you guys questions regarding some upcoming topics on my Instagram stories and you answered them for me. So right now we're going to jump straight into your thoughts and see where everyone is at. The first question I posted was, what has been your hardest challenge throughout your degree or your career in STEM? And I had some really interesting answers. One that came up a couple of times was difficult and unsupportive or uninterested PhD and honours supervisors, or even bosses that are in a role that they personally didn't enjoy. One person said that their supervisor would be great to work with as a researcher, but shouldn't be supervising. Now, this one really resonated with me. I've had experiences with supervisors like this, and a few of my friends have too, and it makes life really hard. Somehow, I managed to come out of my own experiences pretty well, and this is definitely something I would love to share a bit more information on, particularly the strategies that you can use. So if this is something that resonates with you, feel free to ask me some questions about the topic and I'll address this topic in its own episode. Another challenge that came up was GIS. So for those of you who don't know, GIS, or Geographic Information Systems, is a framework used by scientists and engineers and people like that for gathering, managing, and analysing data, mostly in map forms. So basically, you use a computer program to manipulate data in order to visually represent it. For example, you could make a map out of the distribution of an animal population and its threats to, find optimum habitat. You can combine all of this data to find out the best place to put a reserve. There are many more uses to this, but that's the most common one in my field. Now, like I said in the introduction, I am by no means a data wizard, and I personally find GIS a little bit intimidating too. I did okay in the subject at uni, but I definitely wasn't confident, and I find this is a common theme among undergraduates, not only in GIS, but also using other data analysis programs like R or MATLAB. They're programs that can manipulate a lot of information, and this can seem intimidating if you don't understand the strings of codes or the icons that control them. However, data analysis and the ability to use these programs are skills that are highly sought after all across fields of STEM, and having them puts you entire staircases above your peers, not just a few steps in front of them. So in a few episodes' time, we're going to get in a couple of special guests to discuss exactly why people are intimidated by these programs and what you can do to get your head around them and start using them more confidently. Another question I asked on the Instagram page was, if you could ask the people leading your country one question, what would it be? This question seemed to spark a whole lot of, something inside of people. I want to say anger, but that's not really quite it. I got a lot of responses along the lines of, what the hell are you doing? And why are you destroying the planet? And I honestly think it's so much more to this. two that were fairly specific were one from Sophie, who said that she would love to ask the people leading her country if they actually know what's going on with the climate. And one from Lara, who said she'd like to ask them, why do the wants of a few come before the needs of so many? And these questions are so relevant in our current climate, and I think these are things that we all want to know. And I mean, based on ethics and political trends, I might be able to give you a rough idea, but I would really love to know the answers to these questions too. So we're going to try and get a hold of a few politicians for some interviews, and we'll see what we can find out, what things look like from their perspective, because I'd really love to know. Diving a little deeper now, I asked, what questions do you ask yourself, the universe, God, or whoever it is you ask on a regular basis? One person said they ask what difference are they actually making for the world, and what difference are they making for their children? And this one is hard. This is one of the biggest things that I think we ask ourselves, and when you add children to the mix, it makes things a whole lot harder. I think that people serve a number of things in this life. You have people who serve themselves, people who serve others. And among those who serve others, you have people who serve the world, like humanitarians, conservationists. You have people who serve those close to them, or people on an individual level, like nurses and doctors, and those who only serve their families and their children, and those who serve themselves, of course. And I think you can be any one of these people, but then when you have your own kids, your perspective might change and you have a lot more to consider. And even without kids, usually serving one cause is at the detriment of serving another, and this is where ethics get complicated. People start questioning themselves, you get imposter syndrome, you start asking questions like, am I good enough, or do I belong here? And we've got a whole lot of these questions in response to this one that I asked on the Instagram page. So I'll be dedicating an entire episode to this one pretty soon. A final question I asked resulted in a lot of questions and statements from you guys about the choices to have children, understanding or not understanding why people can't look beyond themselves to see how issues in our world are affecting others, how you can do more, and a few people asked for some tips on reducing their impact on this home that we called Earth. So it looks like we've got a lot to talk about. That's all the questions I'm going to cover for the moment though, and I really cannot wait to answer them all in a lot more detail, and I'm going to get some guests in to help me work through these questions with you guys. And let me just say, you guys are so passionate, and that really just sets my soul on fire, so thank you so much for answering those questions. If you have any more questions regarding the topics I've just covered, feel free to jump on the Eco-Scientist Instagram page and shoot me a DM. I'll also be posting another question sticker on the Instagram page at some point in the next couple of days, so you can jump on there if you like. Now, with that, I'm going to end this little introductory episode. In the next episode, I'm going to be talking about climate anxiety and the way a lot of scientists and, everyday people feel when we look at the world around us and the damage that's being caused by humanity, and what on earth you can do to help the cause and help that feeling go away in the process. We're going to cover a lot about how to alleviate this paralysis that a lot of us feel as a result of climate anxiety, so that we can actually work towards solving the issues we're facing. We're going to have a lot of laughs, a lot of helpful tips, and a bit of a vent together, so feel free to jump straight into that episode after this one. That was episode 1 of the Eco-Scientist podcast. I'm Amalia Valley, wishing you a great day or a great night wherever you are.